Please rise and join me in pledging allegiance to our country's flag. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Before we get to the minutes, I want to just briefly comment on the absence of our health officer, Mr. Larry Taltone, who normally would be here at the meeting and providing his monthly report. Mr. Taltone has suffered an illness and is unable to be with us this evening. He is recovering very nicely at home, and he is at home currently. And I heard from him via email today, and he thanked us all for our well wishes and the flowers, sent a photograph of the flowers. And so he feels very good at this outpouring of affection, which, although he might not have expected it, I know we all have accorded him over these many years. So again, if you're listening, Larry, and I hope you have something better to do, but if you're listening, get well soon, and we miss you, and come back to Radnor Township because we need you. So I did send an agenda, which I misheaded the March 18th agenda, but it is in fact the April 15th agenda. And I also forwarded via email the minutes of the meeting of March 18th, 2013. And I'd like to have a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Any second?
Second.
Thank you. The motion has been made and seconded. Are there any comments on the minutes, additions, deletions, corrections? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes as submitted, say aye. Aye. Any contraries? Hearing none, the minutes are approved as submitted.
Good job, Claudia.
Okay. We will now move on to old business. The health officer's report, which would have been given this evening by Mr. Taltone, will be combined with his report hopefully next month. So we'll move on to old business. Do we have anything for, excuse me? Do we have anything for teen health issues?
I attended the Ask meeting on April 11th, and Claudia joined me, and I hope you are all in receipt of the minutes.
Thank you for sending them.
There are a few other things besides the minutes, but for the benefit of the public, the security level in the high school is up. There are new measures on the exterior doors, all being locked. Of course, with students letting other students in or whatever happens, but other than that, they feel very good about the whole thing. Radnor High School is participating in Celebrate My Driver this October. It's with an insurance company, and they randomly check seatbelt use when the students are coming into school, and there's a cash award. So I believe Mr. Skellinger will be checking into that with some other people. The Speak Up event will be continued next year at Radnor, and while 8th grade parents are encouraged to come, it's a high school-based program and not intended for middle school students in the fall. They're fine in the spring. Radnor's Challenge recently had a meeting and is also having a bonding activity, had it yesterday. and they're currently working on easing the transition of the 8th graders coming to the high school. Winterfest was a great turnout. Mrs. Esther Purnell from Radnor Middle School reported that Lily Tang won the contest for the calendar, the Delaware County calendar, again, basically with anti-drugs, alcohol, tobacco messages. So kudos to Lily again. She's presently an 8th grader. They talked about, Mrs. Purnell talked about the PAYS survey and how late and delayed the results were and what they plan to do with it. And I thought that was very insightful. They're working on talking about a large collage inside the building with messages that connect to the results from that. So they're not, it's so nice to know that there might be a survey that somebody would do something with. So I applaud Mrs. Purnell. They're also working on a mindfulness program. Jenny Roca would basically be the trainer, and basically what they're working to do is to train the students and some faculty as to how to manage stress on a more personal basis. And they would apply for 2 grants, and then hopefully the school would have the other third of that. So that would be, again, another thing. And Radnor Middle School has applied for the School to Watch certification, and they're looking for that. Most of that was in your packet, but the public would not, have known that. I met with Dr. Laura Offit and I know this board knows her, and she has started a teen blog on health issues and a Twitter account. And we met for 2 hours, and with all due respect, we had both of our computers, but I was not sure what to do with mine regarding the blog and the Twitter and the tweeting and the whole 9 yards. But I do have it up here, so we were talking about ideas as to connecting the health curriculum with her blog and addressing teen health issues. So she's very genuine, very bright, and she does not want to monetize any of this. This is all public service. And so that is something, and I talked with the people at Ask the other day, told them all about it, sent her name to health educators in the district, and asked the Ask team if she could come and speak at our May meeting, and she is. So I'm excited about that we could actually begin a communication and a dialogue where we are serving our teens as we should. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. I should
just
point
wanted
out
to-
that ASK stands for Alliance for Safe Kids, and for our viewers who may not be aware of that, and I thank you for that report. Did you mention during that report, or did they cover, usually they have a spring program that should be coming up soon?
There are 2 remaining programs, the Speak Up programs, April 25th and May 9th.
I just wanted to add that for teens that are interested in finding Dr. Laura Offit's, and she is on Tumblr, Twitter, Facebook. If you search by Teen Health or her name, Laura, and her last name is Offut, you can find her. Offutt, okay, thank you. And her whole focus is wanting teens to feel free to ask, questions and get information about things that they may not be getting elsewhere. So about any, health-related topic at all.
Thank you so much. What I meant to end with, for any teens out there or parents listening, it's Real Talk with Dr. Offit is what you go to. Real Talk with Dr. Offit, or RT with Dr. Offit is the Twitter account. Let's hope I got both of those right, but it's OFFUTT. I can't wait to tell my sons that I'm actually blogging these days, so thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Great. You mentioned the PAYS survey. My understanding from our last meeting, Kevin Kane, our liaison from the Radnor Township School District, I think he indicated, unless my memory is incorrect, that the district was not going to be able to do that survey this year?
I believe he did indicate that, sir, but Mrs. Purnell said that she thought that the middle school would be doing it next year. So I guess they need to communicate about that, and I certainly hope they do, because it's worth it as long as we do something with the data.
Thank you. Anything else on that issue? We'll move on to the next item under old business is the school lunches and snacks issue. Is there any further report on that? Nope. Okay. Dr. Leader is not here with us yet tonight, so I will pass over the sugary drinks posters, except to say that I think we've now gotten in just about every location in the township that we might want to be in. I don't know if there are any others that folks might think of, but we'll take that off. Chapter 115, which is the township's animal control ordinance, is on the agenda. And Commissioner Nagel is here with us this evening as liaison from the Board of Commissioners, representing them. I don't know if there's anything new, Mr. Nagel, that you would have to report on
Only that the language has been modified based on the conversations you had with Commissioner Schaefer. So that's what will be presented.
Thank you. Again, in summary, that language that the commissioners are inserting into the Chapter 115 revisions that this board sent to them has to do with conforming with regard to licensure requirements for dogs and cats kept by residents of Radnor Township. Conforming with the requirements of Delaware County.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment. I'm content with that, with the commissioners inserting the language. I just didn't want the Board of Health modifying a document we had sent to the commissioners nearly 3 years ago. So the fact that it was done with input from one of the other commissioners, I think, is fine with me.
Any other comments or questions on that? Thank you very much. Amy, Radnor Health Matters is on there. I know you had to postpone the recording of that program on emergency preparedness.
Right, so we have a taping set up, hasn't happened yet, for Radnor Health Matters that'll be with the head of the Delaware County, both emergency medical, the sort of medical reserve corps and the sort of general volunteers, so he'll be able to talk about all that. And then also the person who's the head of the people with functional needs and all the related emergency preparedness activities and actions related to that topic. So I think it'll be a really good a really good session. So I'm looking forward to doing that and getting that up, and hopefully, making people more aware of the different agencies that are around related to emergency preparedness and sort of the subset of those that are medically and health related, and how the different entities, how one would access them. For example, FEMA. What is the role of FEMA, and how would people access that during an actual emergency or disaster? sort of ditto with the Medical Reserve Corps and for people with functional needs, of which is a whole variety of things, from language to equipment to power to mental health. Sort of what are the resources? How can people volunteer? And how would those services and people and volunteers be accessed during an emergency or disaster? So, our idea is to be, or my idea is to be very practical, and so looking forward to that.
Thank you. Any questions on that issue? Okay. That completes the old business. We'll move on to new business. Does anyone have anything in the way of new business for this board? Hearing none, I think we'll move on to public participation. And we have we do have a member of the public here tonight, and why don't you step up to this microphone?
Mr. Hazen, while she's walking up, since Larry's not here, he would have mentioned that there is a drug take-back day on the 27th. It'll be here in the township from 10 to 2, I believe. Further information's on the Radnor website.
Thank you for that, and my apologies. I should have mentioned that since I knew it also. That is April 27th, and as Commissioner Nagel has indicated, the times and location are on the township's website. And now, please introduce yourself.
My name is Sarah Pilling, and I'm a 31-year-old resident of Garrett Avenue in Garrett Hill. I am one of the founders of the Common Ground Community Garden and I'm one of the 2 facilitators for the establishment of the Skunk Hollow Community Garden at the Willows. And that's how this whole issue of hens in Radnor has come about, because I meet all these new people and we're growing pesticide-free, healthy food, and it just morphs right over into chickens. And most of the people there said, well, what do we do about it? And I said, well, fools walk in where angels fear to tread. I've done this before, not with chickens, but with dogs at Emlyn and Elfield. I'll take this on. So we call ourselves RCLUC, which is Radnor Citizens for the Legalization of Urban Chickens. And the first thing we did was circulate a petition, and I have a whole folder for your president, because I thought I was just going to briefly talk about this tonight. I do have a vet standing here, but I must have a dog emergency. That's Joan Capuzzi, who has written a very thoughtful 2-page article on the health of chickens in Radnor Township. At any rate, we have 95 petitions, and I also have emails from 15 other people saying, of course we should have chickens in Radnor. And the truth of it is, we do have chickens in Radnor. There are lots of chickens in Radnor, and some of them are on small properties, and some of them are on large properties, but they're all aliens, because they're all terrified that Larry Tattoon's going to show up, and that's going to be the end of chickens. I worked with staff, with Kevin Kachansky and Bob Zinkowski, and they think this is a great idea. It's a natural step. So I took it to the Board of Commissioners in October and presented it, and sadly for me, Jim Higgins had exited the room, so it came out to a 3-3 vote. Therefore, it was dead. I was told by Don Curley, head of community development, he didn't like the way we'd done it, bringing it to the board to take it through community development, but I'm not getting anywhere. So I'm coming to you through the side door to get a ruling on the health aspect of having home chickens. What are we talking about? We're talking about chickens in a zoning capacity as an accessory use. There are rules for building garages and sheds. And depending on what zone you live in, it has to be anywhere from 3 feet from the side lot to 25 feet from the side lot. Depends on the size of the property. It is limited to single-family dwellings, not to twins, and it's for personal use only. Noise? No. no noise, hens only. They do sing a bit when they lay an egg, but you do not have roosters at 3 o'clock in the morning. The number of hens would be determined by the zoning district you were in. The minimum would be 3, the maximum probably 6. Dr. Capuzzi talks about 4. It would be an adequate size coop and safe for chickens, particularly from predators. They would be caged or confined, whichever word you'd like to use. Wherever they are would not be visible from the street. And my idea, immediately adjacent to a coop within a small distance, would be a compost pile, because there's nothing like composted chicken poop and bedding to enrich it. So why are we doing this? Why has this conversation gotten started? Well, it's not just in Radnor Township. It's in 26 major cities in the United States. Philadelphia is the last major city to conquer the issue of home chickens. And if you know anything about North Philadelphia and the Latino area, you know there are chickens there. People are concerned to buy locally. They want fresh. They want pesticide-free. And in the case of chickens, even in their eggs, they want antibiotic-free. I know personally I'm allergic to just about every antibiotic on the market. So I'm really leery about the food I eat because I don't want to have a reaction. Chickens are great for recycling. Your vegetable peelings get fed to the chickens, you use the eggshells dried out for your vegetable garden. Mike McGrath says put them in the hole before you plant your tomatoes. And as I said, the chicken dew, done well in a compost pile, is great fertilizer, which means you don't have to use chemical fertilizers. You begin to do things more naturally. And chickens are also a great educational value for kids. They're tame, particularly if you're careful which breeds you buy. As I said, we've got a movement. It's gotten a little stalled. I'm hoping that the Board of Health will talk about this. I'm hoping that Joan will get here. No, I don't see her. She must have had an emergency. But in the packet I've given is a very thoughtful 2-page letter on chickens. We're not talking about large numbers of chickens. We're talking anywhere from 3 to 5 chickens, because guess what? Chickens lay about 200 eggs a year. So in the spring, the summer, and the fall, if you had 3 chickens, you're going to get 3 eggs a day. So you don't need a lot of chickens. Right now, and Baron Gemmer helped me, and we did a search. You could only have chickens in an agricultural conservation zone district, which is 5 acres, except it says no poultry or hatchery. So they're totally illegal. I think they should be regulated so that we know that chickens are safe and the people are safe in Radnor Township, rather than have this underground chicken thing. So that's my pitch. As I said, I've given you all the information. I'm hoping that the Board of Health will take this issue up and be able to say to the commissioners, well, we don't, from a health point of view, we don't see an issue. But, and I'll answer any questions that I can. We do have resources, which I've also put in here. We have Joan, who I understand you know. Julie Anderson is with the Delaware County Cooperative Extension. She runs the entomology program for them in many, many schools, and she'd love to get into the Radnor schools. And she was very instrumental in facilitating a new global animal ordinance for Middletown Township. Do you know it? It regulates dogs and cats and pigs, because there are pot-bellied pigs, and ducks and geese and chickens. So rather than just focusing on chickens, they did a global rewriting of Middletown Township, Delaware County's ordinance, and it lays it out very carefully. Tredyffrin has one. They asked for 3 acres. Frankly, I asked Matt Bauman, who's gardening with us, what do you think? And he said, Sarah, as long as the neighbors don't complain, we're not going to go after chickens unless there's a real problem. He said, we've got many, many more important things to do. And as I said, I asked Kevin about that, and he said, well, I'd really like to see an ordinance that both protects the chickens but allows them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. At this point, I'll ask my colleagues on the board if there are any questions or comments that anyone would care to offer at this time.
I just had one question. Do you know offhand how some of the other areas have addressed the issue of chickens as bringing wild and possibly rabid animals, bringing them sort of out more? Like they're tempted by the...
I haven't a clue.
Oh.
I know that Swarthmore allows chickens right in the middle of downtown locally. Whitpain Township allows chickens. There's no worry about rabid animals. They're much more concerned about hawks than they are about foxes. And I heard a very interesting story this week. I have a friend who lives in Whitpain who has a lot of chickens and a lot of ducks, and she had a pair of geese, domesticated geese, gray geese. And the gander was hot after the goose lady all the time, so she decided that the gander had to go. She never had a hawk attack as long as she had those pair of geese. And she had 3 hawk attacks very quickly. So she went out and got a gander. So now she's going to keep it because the gander is on the alert all the time. And so the geese can't get in. If you're properly caged and you're using hardware cloth, not chicken wire, a raccoon can go through the chicken wire, and apparently they grab the chicken by the neck and tear its head off. But if you're using hardware cloth and you put hardware cloth under the coop and up the sides, then it's almost impossible. And you use good locks because raccoons are very, very adept. They're not going to get in. So I think a rat in a compost pile, I have a compost pile, I've had a compost pile for 30 years. Well, I have a rat that lives there. He doesn't bother me, I don't bother him. He eats the vegetable garbage and works the compost pile, and that's just, we can't keep every varmint out. But I think if they're properly caged and confined, I don't know that it's a problem. But I can't answer that, Amy.
Any other questions? Dr. Leader?
Yeah, so would you expect this to work in a similar way as maybe a family here in Radnor were to, would you apply to have chickens at your home, and then maybe Mr. Taltowan would come out and expect that the coop was secure like we do for the quarantine and the cats, or is there any kind of an application in this, or how would that work?
Many of the cities have, you buy a license every year. And Kevin's comment was, oh dear God, another thing to watch. I think it would be very valuable from the township's point of view that you registered the fact that you had backyard chickens. And if Larry was driving around, say in Garrett Hill, he could swing by and check it and make sure it was safe. And if you had a permit, there could be regulations that says they must be properly confined. You must use hardware cloth. I mean, any of the regulations you want. The feed must be kept in metal trash cans because squirrels will eat through plastic in a moment. I think you could regulate it that way. And of course, as per tradition, if the neighbor complains, then you got a problem. But if everybody knows that, and they don't get roosters, I don't know what the problem is, particularly if they compost what comes out of the coop. But that's only from talking to people who have chickens. And we're limiting, there'd be an intentional limiting of the number of chickens. And the eggs could not be sold. This is for home use only. Should you barter some eggs? I don't see why not. But you can't establish an egg business. This is really home use only.
What is the, I've never raised chickens before, the odor situation like with chickens in a coop?
If you change the bedding and you put it in a compost pile, there is no odor. It would be an ammonia smell, but that would only be if you really neglected it. And chickens are either raised on straw or on pine shavings. And the pine shavings absorb the urine. The surface of the run can be granite leavings or river sand, and you rake it, and then what you've raked out, because you know they scratch like crazy, what you've raked out goes in your compost pile. This is how this woman in Whitpain Township does it. And it's not an odor. If you keep it clean, there is no odor. If you neglect it, there is.
I actually have a number of different questions. And going back with the compost is, I mean, if you don't have anything to do with that compost, I mean, you've led on for a variety of different uses that you would utilize your compost. I mean, as far as, you know, I guess the whole thing comes back to some sort of regulations. Are there any regulations in this township? I mean, I don't know, I guess.
Poultry's prohibited.
You mean about compost?
No, not the compost. I'm about the chicken coops and the hens. You know, I've heard the words caged or confined. And then there's compost, and how much compost does, you know, are we talking about, and where is the compost going, and the different things that could possibly be in the compost besides your
Jenny,
rat.
I think that goes back to you, are you a gardener or not? If you're
Well,
not a
right.
gardener, then, but do you put mulch around your plant material in the summer?
Right, but I don't know, like, numbers, so, I mean, like, how much of a how much
Not much.
compost are we talking about?
Come up, Dr. Capuzzi. This is Dr. Capuzzi who was able to get here. She needs you to come to the mic, because it's being shown on channel whatever.
Yeah, I don't know the amount of compost. Yes. Yes, I'm Dr. Joan Capuzzi. I'm a small animal practitioner. And I know a little bit about chickens, but I don't do poultry medicine. But I have a little bit of background in poultry medicine just from school, and also I've raised chickens. And I know about zoonoses as well, which are diseases that are spread amongst different species and can be transmitted between people and animals. I don't know the amount of compost. But what I can say, in addition to it being a good thing to use, probably the best fertilizer for gardening, it also biodegrades, so it's kind of a non-issue. It becomes one with the soil very quickly. It practically disintegrates and disappears. It's a non-issue. That I can say. It doesn't build up like with horse manure. I mean, they have to get rid of it. That will build up if somebody, like, you may have all seen the I think one of the only remaining horse properties that was, you know, has been grandfathered in. They just got rid of their last horse, that white horse on Darby Paley Road, and that's in Haverford Township. And that's an example of manure that was not removed on a regular basis. I mean, you have to remove horse manure. You don't have to with chickens. It pretty much blends. It pretty much biodegrades very quickly, and chickens don't create a lot of it. And I will only compare, and I know this sounds ridiculous, to ducks. For some reason, ducks are extremely messy, and they excrete a lot of what they digest that goes through their systems. Chickens, they're a little more efficient when it comes to nutrients. So
You still have the bedding.
geese,
Right, that's
geese
true.
are messy too. I mean, as anybody who's walked in one of these parks knows, they're disgusting. But chickens are not like that.
I have a question probably for Commissioner Nagel. What do we have in the ordinance now regarding chickens?
I think Sarah related, it's only in ag conservation, AC, which by definition are a minimum of 2 acres. And it's another example of some of the fine ordinances we have where it tells you the setbacks and all that, but then it goes on to say no chickens, basically, no coops. So it has internal conflicts in it.
Well, what it refers to is poultry hatcheries. Well, one's not running a hatchery when there's A, no rooster, and B, you've got 4 hens. That's not a hatchery. So the essence is, and this was last modified in 1990, there is no governance of poultry, chickens, potbelly pigs, ducks, rabbits in Radnor Township. But chickens, you can eat the eggs, and so that's what we'd like to do, is to be able to have our own eggs that have been fed organic feed, and there's no antibiotics in it, and there's no hormones in it, and it's also so local, it's in your backyard, you're not driving to buy eggs. It's just really healthy. But do you have any, Len, do you have any questions for Dr. Capuzzi?
That isn't Len Donato, that's Andrew Foreman, who's a
Oh, I'm
pediatrician.
sorry.
That's all right, thank you. Are there any other questions? I guess one of the questions, well, I have several questions, and the most important one from my point of view is that all too often we find people, maybe impulse is too strong a word, but I'll use that, think that raising chickens in their backyard would be a nice idea, and 6 months later they get tired of it, or a year later they get tired of doing it. And some people will think it's a nice idea and not have a clue as to how to raise chickens, what the things that they need to do to safeguard themselves, the chickens, their neighbors, and the community in general. What do you envision in the way of an educational program?
Funny that you should ask. Mainline School Night is giving a course on raising urban chickens this week. So they're beginning to educate because they're seeing a need. There's a demand. So there is an educational process in place right now.
Well, that's fine as far as it goes, but Mainline School Night, the last time I checked, is a voluntary activity. You sign up for classes and you pay for them, whatever the fee is.
Well,
people don't.
There could be a required class for chickens in order to get the permit to have chickens. I have asked this question of other people who have chickens, not in Radnor Township, but in other townships. And there are people with farms who become sanctuaries for chickens. You get your chickens, and after a year, this is just too much work, or you move or something. And there is even a Facebook page for Philly chickens. And there are farms who will take chickens. Hens eventually stop laying, and they either go in the soup pot or they go into a sanctuary. And there are farms who are more than happy to have them because they don't all have to be laying. So I understand your concern. I think it's a very thoughtful process to begin to raise chickens. There could be an orientation class before you get your permit to have chickens in Radnor. I don't know that any other township is doing that. They've all been concerned with regulating the chickens rather than educating. Of course, if your school district participates in the Chick Embryology Club, which is wonderful that Penn State provides for free, you have little children learning about chickens. And they're the best teachers for mom and dad.
But I think we need to be very careful of is the people who will think it's a great idea for a while, and then when they're tired of it, just open the coop door and walk away.
The chicken won't last very long.
No, I know that. I know that the chickens won't, and it's not an identical issue as to feral cats. But we do experience that, as you must know, living in Garrett Hill.
Yes.
In our township, and You know, I understand the chickens won't last as long as the cats do, but, not nearly. But the behavioral, the human behavioral side of the issue is very much the same. People got tired of owning those cats, couldn't take care of them anymore, and now they're out there.
Well, if they'd neutered their cats, they wouldn't have as serious a problem with.
So I think you brought up a great point. And you're always going to find people who sort of go into something in an overzealous manner and then get bored of it, realize it's too much work, whatever. And that's, you're going to have some of that. But I think it's a little different than, like, you know, the Easter phenomenon of people buying bunnies, and then, you know, when the bunnies are bigger or not as cute or whatever, or too much work, they get rid of them, or chicks.
Ducks.
I think with chickens, it's so much work in the beginning to, you know, get the coop, get the infrastructure, to, you know, find the feed suppliers, do the research, that I don't think people are going to go at it as much in an impulsive, foolhardy way as, like, buying a chick for their kid, you know, or buying bunnies. As far as the comparison with cats, you know, cats are, you know, a socially accepted, politically correct pet, and, you know, and they multiply like crazy, and it's a different story. And chickens wouldn't last a night. They wouldn't even last one night in this township if somebody opened the coop door.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and I don't bring them up because I believe that.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, the township, you know, could have, as part of the permit program, as part of obtaining a permit, and it should be something that people need permits for, and that should be monitored to some extent. Of course, should be mandatory either through the township or through 4-H. 4-H right up here, you know, has some real great chicken experts who could do a nice course that would, I think, should be mandatory. Something should be mandatory, so that's a great point.
And they would do it for free.
Yeah, they would. They would.
We had all received copies of your very thoughtful letter, Dr. Kapusky, the one, I think it's a 2-pager. And you reference the H5N1 strain of avian influenza in your letter. And granted, the issues are as you've described. We're now looking at a new strain of influenza, also related to avian animals. And I'm wondering if you would care to comment on that.
I think as of today, something like 60, 65 people have died. It's very deadly. I don't know how virulent it is because not that many people have it. I think at this point is limited to Asia, and it's probably, I don't know anything about it, except it's probably a close cousin to H5N1. I mean, they're constantly mutating. It's really
Whatever.
but it's a non-issue in a closed flock. Now, if it ever gets to the United States, then obviously supply houses for chickens would be an issue. Where are people getting their chickens? It's not in the United States. I don't know that it's all that virulent. It is somewhat deadly, although only like 60 people have gotten it. But it's, at this point, a non-issue. What's a bigger issue with a lot of these avian viruses is really, I mean, it's the flying birds that can transmit across long distances. A closed flock that is healthy is just not going to transmit to another flock. You're not going to get a run of the virus.
And isn't it also the poultry is being raised under very crowded conditions?
That's more a salmonella issue. Okay. Stress-related diseases like salmonella that are already there can proliferate under stressful conditions or immunocompromised conditions in an individual chicken. But No, not, I don't think that's the case for the avian influenza.
You've correctly indicated that so far this has been, the new strain has been confined to Asia. I believe China's most
I
prevalent.
think it's
But,
Singapore.
at any rate, that raises another issue, and I'm not raising these as objections, but to educate whatever viewers we have. When people acquire chickens to raise in their backyards, how do they do that? What is the source of those chickens?
The source, I don't know. I don't know where people are getting their chickens, but the potential sources are Pickering Valley Feed is one of the bigger suppliers in this area, and they're in Exton. Pickering Valley Feed. They have tons of varieties. They are true chicken experts. They're very responsible. They get from good sources. There are also places like Green Dragon in Lancaster has an animal auction, and that's sort of a different beast altogether. But you can also obtain healthy chickens from there as well. They're mostly Amish bred chickens, but you can obtain healthy chickens there as well. What do you know? as far as
Moyer
sources?
Chickens,
Oh, Moyers.
Moyers, and Tractor Supply in Lionville and Pottstown also has baby chicks.
And they can be ordered online as well.
Yeah.
Well, I guess, would we be assured that the chickens people would be acquiring would be domestic and not imported?
I don't think there's any other way they can acquire them.
Yeah.
I mean,
They may
any
not-
animals that come into this country are quarantined from other countries. And, there are inspectors whose full-time job it is to make sure that this doesn't happen. So could it happen illegally? Yeah, I mean, there's black market trade in all sorts of illegally traded animals, but
And most little chicks have been inoculated.
Well, again, I'm raising these questions
But
so that people
they're good questions.
are
Now, they're not
educated.
all Leghorns, they're not all Rhode Island Reds. There are English heritage chickens, there are Australian heritage chickens. They're bred and hatched here, but their origins may be from other countries, but they're all local. And if you do a Google search, you just won't believe McMurray's is one of the most reputable provider of day-old chicks, because that's how you usually get them. Either that or you get pullets, which are 20 weeks and about to lay. But you know what? You're not going to invest in this unless you're going to get a healthy chicken. You certainly don't want to get baby chicks that have a very good chance of dying, that aren't healthy from a healthy line, because you're making an investment. You're buying a coop, you're building a run, you're buying the feed, you're buying the feeders, you're buying the bedding. So it's a financial commitment to begin to raise chicks.
I don't think it's a big impulse
No, I don't
decision
either.
at all. Not chickens. A cat, yes. A bunny, yes.
Maybe.
Puppy
Not
mill.
chickens.
Maybe. I spent a lot of money for my dog, and it wasn't an impulse, but, and this would be the last of my comments anyway, and perhaps it's more for Commissioner Nagel, if the Board of Commissioners gets back to considering this issue. It seems to me that requiring a permit is an outstanding way to go with this, for many reasons, but one that's, I think, been alluded to here is the fact that while we haven't seen the new strain of avian influenza in this country yet, we may, who knows, and things do get to a point where public health authorities need to know where these chickens are. And permitting enables us to have at least a tracking and recording mechanism for that. That's all.
Yeah, I just have a comment. Seems like there are a lot of regulatory issues involved here, like feeding controls and security of cages and licensing and how to handle complaints and all that. But I don't know if I can speak for everybody else, but I just got this information a few days ago. And I think it's probably premature for this board to make any decision on
And
this
we
tonight.
weren't asking for
Okay.
that.
I just wanted to make it understood that, you know,
No.
Were
I
you
was
asking us to
I
come
was
to a
asking to
decision
be put
tonight?
on your agenda for May and deal with it then. I didn't realize in the initial conversations I had with Amy that I was going to do more than just introduce this as a topic that I wish the Board of Health would take up. So I'm not worried about that.
We just
All the
took
people
advantage of
who
your
already have
presence here.
chickens in Radnor Township will continue to have their chickens. I just think it would be better for the chickens and the people if we had a decent, inclusive ordinance that regulated the chickens, but allowed them so the people aren't living in fear that that Larry Tattoon's going to drive down the road someday and go, oh, and then they're going to have to get rid of their chickens. And there may not be a valid reason why, except that they're there.
Well, I
wasn't.
wasn't-
Let me just say, I would also like to know what the reasoning behind the Board of Commissioners was to be split on this issue. Was it just purely regulatory, or were there other issues involved?
John, can you answer that?
It was I would say, a gut reaction. It was introduced and decided on in 20 minutes, 10 minutes. And in fact, as Sarah pointed out, if Jim Higgins hadn't walked out to go to the restroom, it would have passed.
That's right.
And we would have directed community development to work on an ordinance.
Ms. McCarthy.
I have a concern. Again, we just got the information, so I certainly can't say I understand this, but I do think also that an ordinance is most important because I would not want to pit neighbor against neighbor, you know, that's in there now. So as far as this community, we're a very small community, and if, you know, everything's going fine in your neighborhood and we don't have something in writing saying, you know, what the rules are, it could create more havoc than.
And if the momentum continues to build, there will be an ordinance written. It's not going to happen without an ordinance. It's just moving the ball forward.
Thank you.
Ms. Burns?
Yes, thank you. I was just wondering why I guess and maybe this is a processorial, such a word, as far as why it didn't go back to the board
It went to.
of commissioners.
Okay, can I answer that?
Oh, sure, I'm sorry.
No,
I mean, I'm just
the-
like,
The commissioner involved with community development voted against sending it to community development to write the ordinance because he didn't like the way we had done it. The way we had done it was the way staff had told us to do it. So I went back, I talked to that commissioner, I found out the way he wanted it, I submitted it the way he wanted it, and he said, I heard him say, well, I don't want chickens, so I'm not going to do anything about it. That's not exactly democratic. So for one commissioner in one ward to say no, and actually his ward has as many signers of the petition as any other ward, but that's beside the point. So that it was purely, I don't know. So I'm not going to give up. We'll just continue to work ahead. It's just that I had heard through a gardener over the weekend that chickens were going to be discussed on your agenda at some point. And I said to that person, well, am I going to be included because I'm leading this effort? And that person said, well, why don't you come to the Board of Health and begin to talk about it? So that's why we're here. So I don't want it all to get going and then the commissioners go, well, we have to send it to the Board of Health. It would be nice to have the Board of Health's decision sitting over here and we could say, well, you know, we've already done that and this is what the Board of Health says. Because I realize we need to address it. But so far, we've got Kevin Kachansky off fighting whatever war we're in, and he's not coming back till the end of May. And we've got this commissioner who doesn't want to deal with it because he doesn't want to deal with it. And quite frankly, Jenny, I'm not going to give up, because if you've got a groundswell of people who think this is a good idea, then they should be allowed to bring it forward. If it crashes, it crashes. But don't say you're not allowed to go out of the gate. And so I am continuing to advocate for us to be allowed to have safe, health-wise, safe for the chicken, safe for the people, regulated chickens, rather than people having them already. And then there being there are no regulations for any of the chickens in the township right now. And I don't think that's right. I think there should be. So that's why this conversation came about during the gardening.
Okay, well, thank you for, before you each go, would you stop at Ms. Cardamone's place there and give her the correct spelling of both your names? And let me, while you're doing that, ask Commissioner Nagel, Commissioner, is there any thing that the Board of Commissioners is looking for from this board before we go any further?
Well, probably it would be almost a negative feedback from you that there is no health risk, or you don't see any issues from the Board of Health's position, would be one. The other would be whether you'd encourage it because of the positive aspects of having, fresh eggs, not all doped up with antibiotics, and being fed organic feed. So that's the kind of thing I would expect to see. I believe it should go to planning for the actual formulation of the ordinance. But that's something we have to sort out. But as I said, I'd like to see, one thing for sure is that you have no concerns. And then secondly, if you believe it's a good idea from health and wellness standpoint, that you think it's worthy of consideration.
Well, and that being the case, we will put it on the agenda for our meeting in May, which will take place on May 20th this year, 2013, at 5:00 p.m. in this room. And following that, if we reach some conclusions, we'll do what we usually do in such cases, which is transmit a recommendation one way or the other to the Board of Commissioners. And is there any other business before the board this evening?
I might bring up one additional matter. At our last meeting, we had a presentation by our animal control officer regarding geese. We're having, we've always had a problem with geese, but it's getting worse by the minute. That was referred to Parks and Rec, since that's where most of the geese are. I would fully expect you to be involved in that as they move forward. Right now, they've had a presentation looking at different ways of goose control, and I would expect them to also ask for your support in talking about the health issues. Contrary to chickens, geese produce, we were told, over a pound of feces a day. I was told once by an old gent that a geese violates the rules of thermodynamics, and that they put out more than they take in. So.
And they have the effrontery to put it on our playing fields as well. So.
Yep. Well, playing fields, golf courses, corporate centers, and some people we're now starting to see them on people's lawns.
Thank you. Is there anything else? Seeing none, this meeting stands adjourned. Thank you.